Off we go. Welcome everyone back to the Aftermath. It is the LPL recap episode number 3. As things are starting to solidify, things are starting to come down into a grand old spot. A lot of our predictions obviously came true. Some of our predictions went awry, but the only thing that matters is Yanni is still asleep. At this point, he is halfway on his way to getting a full rotation down, and someday we'll have him here to talk. But until then, we have brought on a new face, one that you might know from the LPL English side of things, though. Joining myself and Faris is going to be the one, the only Slayer, the man in the Among Us goodness, but also having the voice of gold, Slayer. How you doing, my man?
After that intro, I'm doing absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I've done some podcasts before, but I've never got to talk about the LPL, and the greatest region in the world, as we like to claim it, is always fun to talk about. So I'm happy to be here.
Now, let's dive into a little bit more of your experience there, because obviously you've been there pretty much from the early stages of this split. And I mean, this split has had some ups and downs. I mean, we talked to Yanni and Faris here as well, but what has been your experience with the LPL so far and your understanding? Because as you said, greatest region out there. But granted, that's only if you look at certain portions of it. There are some that have not exactly risen to the fame that we gave them at the earlier start of this split.
I think that's a really interesting question, especially when talking about. I think formatting of splits is a really intriguing topic. It's really just in all regions, but the LPL specifically, because like you look at LTA right now, where you've got players like, I think it was either Yon or Umti came out talking about how it's not fun that they only played like 3 best of 3s, and like that's the only time they've had on stage. Where you look at the LPL and from the rip, you're playing full fearless best of 5s, like gauntlet games. I think this schedule is fantastically fun to watch. Like the fact that your entire split 1 hinges on the fact that you have 3 best of 5s. You basically don't make it through. You don't make it through the playoffs unless you win 2 of them, right? So you have to win 2 full fearless best of 5s, or you're not playing any more League of Legends until after first stand, which is I don't know off the top of my head, but like I think it's April or even May, sometime into summer even potentially, or no, it's earlier than that. But my point is, you miss so much League of Legends, right? So it really just makes every single series like super heightened, and like some of the teams we'll talk about, like when I went into the week 1, like talking about like storylines and stuff and what needed to get hit, like some of these groups, it was like apparent that if a team didn't win their first game of the group compared to the rest of the teams in their group, like they were probably out. And that's just like super fun to like jump into a new season that's already got a ton of changes with a new format that's so grueling. I think that's why the LPL, like you're saying, Orbital, in one of those ways is so unique in the best region in the world, is because it's as cutthroat as you can possibly get in League of Legends, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. And also too, like that's kind of like the LPL playoffs, even last split too, is kind of like that, where people are saying like these teams are playing X amount of games. I think they're playing like 25 games or something plus, like something crazy like the TSM number in the playoffs. And because the old playoff system was like, if you're a bottom team, like 10th place on the cutoff, you're going through, like, if you want to get to the finals, best of 5, best of 5, best of 5. It's fitting that the LPL they stuck with that theme. They knew the assignment. They're like, of all of the formats across, like, let's just consider the 4 major regions, or I guess you could kind of consider LTA Seoul and LTA North too, but either way, of all of these major regions, like, let's just make the most unhinged, crazy format, because we got 16 teams. Let's just go for broke like that. I think it was perfect, and I've enjoyed it so much. The format's been awesome. I echo that.
I think it's been giving us some of the best tastes of what is to be offered. It's one of the few times where I'd say the regular season gave us such a big insight that you can get a good read on how the playoffs are actually going to go. There are a lot of times where we look at these leagues, and as you mentioned, some of these Western regions where it's just like, it's there, but once you hit playoffs, then this whole string of other options come in, and you start seeing some of these other bumps come up that maybe didn't see regular split. So gotta agree, a lot of games played, but that also means very interesting matchups that came out and crazy shenanigans all the way through. So let's go ahead and recap what was the end or the entirety of week number 5. Now, granted, there was a little bit of a break in between this and I can't talk right now. It was a break in between week 4 as well as week 5. There were some pickup games as well. So we are covering 9 different matches that concluded the end of stage 1. As soon as we are done with that, we will be talking about stage 2 as well, because there are some predictions that we will have at the end for 4 different series. I won't tell you exactly who they are. If you haven't watched them, go back, watch all the VODs, and maybe hear Slayer yelling his heart out on a couple of those series, man. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it, though. Starting off, it was FPX and NIP, and my God, was NIP having a ball 3-0.
Yeah, it wasn't particularly close. I mean, NIP, even going back to the first matches they hit the ground running a lot faster than I thought they would. In their first match against IG, I thought IG was going to win 3-1. Like, I thought, IG played together in Demacia Cup. Like, they already have these, like, really, I mean, NIP has seasoned players as well, but Doinby's just coming back. Leave hasn't been around in the top of tier teams for a while after he took his leave, I guess, pun intended. So I don't know. I had question marks, and they smoked it in week 1, and then obviously playing against this FPX team who, I think they played with Shadow. Was this the first time they played with Shadow? I feel like they had a different jungler in week number 1. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know.
They definitely had a different jungler week 1. I think this was Shadow's first series.
It was,
which is
yeah.
I mean, FPX is just in a very weird spot. And the fact that, like, this series didn't have much, like, stakehold as well with how the groups were. Like, by this point, like, going back to what I'm talking about, how, like, if you win the first series in some of these groups, like, you're probably locked for playoffs. The IG and IP matchup you were talking about was kind of how I felt. RNG fans could flame me all they want for how I felt about their team. Definitely didn't think FPX was going to make a run out of this group. But yeah, I mean, I think the resounding sentiment about NIP right now is it's just like a bunch of broken parts from other orgs that, like, have, like, been stitched together, and, like, Doinby's crazy mind is just making it all run perfectly. Shanji and Aki have been playing together for a very long time. They were on the OFG roster for all the way up until the end of 2023. They were playing with PP God, who for some reason gets flamed by a couple of the LPL English people. Even I think partly because his name's PP God. But he's been playing really well, and then you just have Doinby, who might be the greatest fearless player on the planet Earth at this point, with how his champion pool performs, and you can throw the Rise meme up. Everything's just, like, kind of rolling. Every piston is firing in this engine, and they kind of just showed against FPX. Like, when you have confidence and your group's kind of locked up like this is what tends to happen, and it's just the perfect way to roll into playoffs. There's not really much else for me to say besides these are two orgs on very different trajectories right now in the LPL.
I think the meta, even though Doinby, like you said, has all these picks up his sleeve, the meta right now, even if it wasn't, fearless, and he did have to kind of just, play the same champion over and over again, or kind of like, the OP champs are still on the board. Rise is really OP. It's picking up traction. Even Pantheon mid, like we're seeing Showmaker play it over in the LCK. And these type of roaming champions, if you think all the way back to when this guy was playing in, like, grand finals, season 9 worlds, pioneered the Nautilus mid. He's diving top lane level 3. Like, this is just what he likes to play. This is the crap that he's good at. So on top of the fact that he's got a deep bag, it also just suits him right now, which I think has been perfect for him to, like, start on this team and just go absolutely insane. Aki as well in this series too, by the way, 22, 3, and 21 across the whole series. Like, holy crap, that's a pretty insane stat line for a jungler too. That's nuts.
I would just like to say, I feel like we don't give respect to Doinby as much. It feels like Doinby was, like, the original pioneer of Fearless. Before Fearless came out, dude was pulling out, like, Nautilus mid and being chaotic in one of the weirdest ways. Like, he was like, I see the future. I will still be here in another 4 years after I have claimed, my my world's championship. But I gotta agree, Aki showed up in this series. Now, granted, this series itself, I think, goes back to what Slayer said. The stats can be a little bit skewed. Fun Plus, unfortunately, a little bit on the weaker side, and unfortunately out at 0-3, so it had to be mentioned. The series, though, was still a 3-0 win at the end of the day, so for NIP, they're sitting there, hey, we're looking good, we're ready to go for the upcoming rest of the season. Right now, though, we are moving on to the next. We are looking at WBG versus JD Gaming, and this my God, was a barn burner of a series. This one went the distance, and it did come out with JDG claiming the victory 3-2. And I want to call the longest series ever. Almost every game going over 30 minutes, and the only one that didn't was game number 2. I mean, Slayer, game number 5 went 46.5 minutes. That is a chaotic one itself.
Yeah, I think the marker of this game and a theme that's like going to carry through for the JDG side is I don't know what they put in Pays' coffee or whatever the hell he's drinking on stage, man. This guy is like single-handedly ripping JDG out of every mid-game mistake they make, and it's like it's wonderful to see. It makes sense, right? You know, games go long, you let your AD carries get to 6 items. They're just going to become the focal point of every team fight. But in a league right now where everybody's talking about, obviously, the split that Elkis came off of, like how big of a player he was, the rise of 1xN as this like pivotal AD carry on Thunder talk that everyone likes to talk about. Pays is like probably bar none the best marksman right now in the league, I would say. And this performance cemented it. And I don't know. I'm just so bipolar on JDG because like sometimes they look like the best team fighting team in this entire league, and they can take down Weibo even when they're throwing away early game leads like they did a couple of times. But I'm like this top side for JDG, like on paper, you read me these names, I'd be like, wow, this team is like deserving of the 3-0 out of Group B that they have. But like Jun and Scout have not been on the same page. It pains me to see that Scout has not been as on point as I would like him to be. And I think that showed a couple times this series. I think Xiaohu was by far none the better mid laner in this series, but sometimes you just get AD gapped when every game goes to 40 minutes. And when Pays is on like this, it's a treat to watch. But yeah, this was such a series.
Before we go further, I will not stand for Scout slander when he went 25, 16, and 34, when he had the most kills of the series. Now, granted, obviously, at the end, I get what you're saying, but we will not stand Scout slander right now, okay?
I don't like doing it. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not a fan of this, but it's just what I feel like I've seen from JDG at this point.
Which is fair.
This team, I guess we'll get into it more once we look forward. But this team is the definition for me of like, will they hit their ceiling? Because if they hit their ceiling, like if they can look like they looked in Game 5 consistently, like we're gonna have a fun playoffs. But it's an if for me at this point.
It's funny, yeah. I guess, you know, the whole language barrier with Pays and the rest of the team, I guess, isn't going to really play a factor when he's carrying games. This is a little off topic, but did you guys see the video? It was a content video that JDG did, and Pays had to say something in Chinese, and the rest of the team they were running. They were laughing so hard at how, I guess, his pronunciations were so bad. But that was a hilarious video. And I guess, yeah, Pays is learning that language. But again, the language barrier doesn't really mean a whole lot in games when he's absolutely popping off. I don't know. I think the highs and lows of JDG is a good point to make, because you even saw in Demacia Cup. Yeah, okay, they didn't get out in Demacia Cup when it was, and again, this is a different season, right? It was on the season 14 patch. But, you know, the TT team that we'll talk about later that did so well did beat them out. We all thought that they were probably going to be the team to get out of that group, and they kind of struggled there. And now they show like a really high level. You can have players on teams that are at the level that all Shun, Scout, Pays, and Missing are, but if they can't hit that consistency, then it's really gonna be their detriment later on. But I think this Weibo Gaming team as well. I think Tian's been a great addition to the squad. I think he's been, played really, really well. He's Mr. Regular. I don't want to call him Mr. Regular Season. That's a little bit but Tian is like always consistently performing. Then he has some like really big stinkers sometimes when it matters. But yeah. I think this team, this Weibo Gaming team, is probably, and I don't know, you can disagree on this if you'd like. This is what I think is the best iteration of Weibo that we've got in like the last 2-3 years.
I would tend to agree, because I think the way TM works so well for Weibo is he kind of bridges how slow they used to play in the early phase. It was like with Xiaohu's champ pool, like he could definitely lean to play a lot more scaling mid lane mages that really dominate later. But Weibo's problems always felt like if they don't get to those like big team fights with like an even set or a lead, they'd be in problems. I think Tien like really speeds this team up well in the early phase. I think him and Hong when they're on together, like really dictating the tempo of the map early, it shows a lot of success. But I mean, the more I look back at this game 5, man, like you have Chemtech Soul, you have Elder, and you have a Jinx. You have Lights Jinx. Like I still can't believe they lost the series that game 5. Like they were at
Yeah.
44 minutes with both marksmen down, knocking on the Nexus turrets, and they could not win this game. And when we get to the playoff format, like losing this game is actually really big for Weibo. I won't say now, but yeah, this might have been like the game. I would say this was game 5 of JG Weibo might have been game of the split of the regular split. I would say with the implications and the gameplay alone.
Oh, that's easy. I think that's easy to say. Absolutely. And I mean, it's a butterfly effect and that's the cool thing about this format. That's what we've been saying is like these one games, especially if it's like a game 5 that decides the series, it has massive implications later on. And yeah, I mean, I agree with the point you made about Tien. You can even just see in the champions that Tien is playing in these games, like Vi, Xin Wukong, Viego, these are champs that have to get it going too. And I think him and Xiaohu have some pretty nice synergy as well on top of the Hong and Tien synergy. Like these two, when they're clicking, they're really dangerous as a duo there. So I'm excited to see more from them. But yeah, dropping this series, I mean, again, it's going to prove to be at least make their lives a little bit harder going forward.
So I guess the question is, considering how this game 5 went about, do we assume if JDG and Weibo Gaming played again, if they were to somehow match up again, would the same outcome occur? Or do we still say that this was too close to call, that this was, just kind of that last little ditch effort that whoever had more willpower is going to take it? Do you think JDG would still come out on top, or do you think it would turn the other way for Weibo Gaming? We'll start with Slayer.
I would lean Weibo, actually. I think if you look across the games, they definitely, the proverbial shot themselves in the foot more. Like, it wasn't even just game 5. I think a lot of their woes came earlier in the series as well. Like, they came out with consistent leads and kind of just fell to some pretty good team fighting. But the wins that they had were like more convincing to me. Like game 3 specifically is one that is very interesting to watch back on, because the game was like pretty even keel at about like the 30-minute mark. There was like maybe 1,000 gold differentiating the two teams. Weibo had like the Drake stack on their side, but outside of that, like there were crazy Baron fights, and they were able to just really lean on the Xiaohu Aurora that's been like absolutely deadly in the LPL and come out on top. I think Weibo is still a much better team fighting team, and that's what you really need to be in the LPL when you get into the playoff series. So I would lean Weibo, but it's going. If it doesn't go 5 games, I'm like shocked, because these teams are just so good at like matching each other across a series. It's honestly awesome to watch. I hope we get this series again because of how this one went in the regular split.
Yeah, so do I. I think it could go either way. Like, I'm being like, if we're just taking this game as the only like evidence of how these two teams play against each other, I mean, this series was literally, like you said, Weibo is knocking at the Nexus in game 5. It's that close between them, so it could go either any of the ways. But yeah, I mean, team fighting is really important. So a team that can fight well in this season, this is the team fight season because of Otacon, because of how many neutral objectives there are. And these Otacon standoffs literally last, especially in LPL, some of them last like 5 minutes. They just sit there. It's clearing vision. It's like the Baron dance on steroids around this Otacon. So you got to be able to like really make it happen and actually execute when it matters. So yeah, I mean, it's the time for team fights, and that's perfect for the LPL. But I don't know. I think it's easy to say it could be either or. Again, depending. I think both of these teams are really, really good, and some of the best in the LPL. So I want to see it again. And I'm at the point where it's just like, see what happens. Go 5 games. Give us another one of these. And I'm not really upset with who falls, unless it's like an egregious int, which is also very possible too. You can't count that out that possibility.
I will say on the JG flip side, I think JG have been a more consistent. I've been consistently a bigger fan of their drafts. I think Weibo like this game 2 draft is like absolutely disgusting to look at. I
know.
hate it.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah. What is that?
for anybody like if you're not gonna look it up now, I'll tell you like breathe. I don't know. I gotta look at the order here how this came across too, but like breathe Jax. It's a Tien Zyra. Zhao who's playing Lucian mid, and then you have a Ziggs Pike bottom lane. If you ever see a Ziggs Pike bottom lane drafted in the LPL, like bet all your channel points on the other team. Like I don't know what to tell you. Like that's the grossest combo. That's what it's just going back to the point, right? Like Weibo shot themselves in the foot in draft at points in this series and then in the game 5. And if they clean up for playoffs, that's why I feel like they'd have an edge. But that is an if scenario for a reason.
And there's also times when I feel like, and I don't know, you can disagree on me this if you want. There's also times when it's like I feel like the better drafts ended up losing. Like look at game 4. Look at that JDG draft. They got Kennen, Lee Sin, Ryze, Callista, Renata Glask. That just seems like so all over the place. There's no real follow-up engage for the Kennen. They have kind of like a pick composition and like the roaming with Ryze. And then the other side, it's like really reliable. You got an assassin for a flank and like team fighting. You got the Varus. You got really good engage. And Rel and Maokai, you can follow it up with Wukong. It's tried and true, but then JDG just completely ran over the game. So, I mean, I don't know.
You're forgetting one thing, Faris. You're forgetting one thing. LPL Ryze doesn't lose anymore with Dwayne B.
That's
back.
true. No, they're bringing the Ryze back, bro. It's the LPL. Yeah, like they
Scout put in a game. Scout put a game in and got a win. A spoiler for the later series we'll talk about. Knight put in a Ryze game, got a win, commanding Ryze game. Like, I think Ryze right now is 4 or 5-0 in LPL so far when it's come out. So most of those games have been Dwayne B, by the way, in case you're curious for obvious reasons. But
we got to tailor those stats a little bit. We have to put a little asterisk at the top and just like, listen, the man's on a mission somehow to get this Ryze back into the meta play. So it makes sense. I also want to point out Slayer. It was a fantastic point to bring up the fact that you did see this kind of shot in the foot style by the side of Weibo, because the one game that you picked out with Ziggs Pike in the bottom lane with the Lucian Zyra was the one game that was quite possibly the smash of the series. It was only 27 minutes, 18 seconds. It was a very fast-paced win. And on the other side, you saw JDG have that Renekton, that Nidalee, the Hui, all of these that can kind of bull rush you in the early stages if they get that lead, and it feels like that might have been what happened. So I love that pickup there, and we will have to see in the future. Again, both teams have made it into playoffs with JDG sitting up there at first. So we'll see how well it plays out, and maybe see a maybe see a repeat series and see what happens there. But moving on next, we get the all-encompassing, the Anyone's Legends versus Team WE, and this one maybe a little shaky ground for the Legends. Maybe they're not up to snuff, but still a series win for them. Although maybe some very slight concerns coming out here.
To me, it felt like. It kind of felt like it was, exactly. 45-minute game number 1. And Team WE, this is not a team that I had very much faith in going into it. But the one thing that they did change up, and I think I remember making a mental note about, and when this happened, was they had a new jungler come up from, I think, the LDL in Monkey, who actually had a pretty solid series to start out. Now, does that mean like he was absolutely smurfing or anything? But maybe not, but Monkey was performing pretty well, and Anyone's Legend was kind of looked like they were struggling. It felt like one of those series where it's a better team that kind of has the better macro sense, and Team WE is like, they're hanging on, they're getting these wins, but they just can't like get it over the goal line. They can't just make it happen. It's kind of feels like we're getting to an inevitable AL win at one point. At least that's how like the first game felt. And then, I mean, WE ended up picking up a win here, but AL did not look nearly as good here as they did in, say, like their wins in week 1 versus Top Esports. Like they looked like if they did play a better team, they probably would have lost this series.
Yeah, you call me the cop-out guy all you want. I'm willing to give like AL a bit of a pass here, because the stakes of the series were like, even going into this matchup, AL already locked up the first seed at 2-0 with the tiebreakers over the 2 1-1 teams, LGD and Top Esports. So while I'm not going to make excuses and say like they shouldn't be playing Clean League Legends every series, they probably had some fun knowing that they locked up the top spot. AL is such a intriguing team to me, because I know a lot of the sentiment around AL, even going into Demacia Cup, was like, Tarzan's back. Flandre's coming off one of his best splits. Like, this could be a fun team, but once they start going up against the Weibos, they start going up against, the BLGs, the, JDGs in form. Like, they're not really going to contend on a high level. And then they just continue right off where they left off in Demacia Cup. And the players that have impressed me the most, Tarzan's going to do Tarzan things. Like, I'm always going to be a Tarzan, like, Glazer, to be honest, the way he plays the jungle. But, like, Shanks was annihilating people on this LeBlanc. I think he goes deathless almost in game 1, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm really impressed with how KL's playing in the support role. I think the LPL in general has a really... It's funny because I always like to tie things back to how I think about the NA tier 2 of all places, because that's like kind of where I'm also rooted when I'm not doing LPL. But like support pool in NA tier 2 is like there's like a huge gap. Like there's not a lot of big support players. But in the LPL, like the reverse, a lot of these guys coming up and these younger players compared to like the missings and the Makos. Like I think we're looking at the next generation of like missing and Mako players. I think KL could be one of them, and then we'll talk about Feather later, I'm sure, as another guy. So
yeah,
the fact that Shanks and KL have been on form as much as they have been to complement a team with a top side like Flandre Tarzan, I think AL might get a bit disrespected in their playoff predictions because their group obviously had WE and LGD in them, but we shouldn't be sleeping on them, I'll say for now.
You're not going to include Vampire in there, Slayer, in the of the supports?
I want to, but I like when your team is playing bad, you're a support player. Like it's hard to grade you. It's like, well,
yeah.
I don't have any winning lanes. I can't roam or ready carry dies. What am I supposed to do?
Don't play Elise. That's all we're gonna say there. All right. So moving on here. By the way, I think Elise in the LPL has a 2-6 win rate so far, which is amazing to say the least.
And if we're also gonna keep the shoutouts just really quickly of crap drafts, dude, what the hell is Set Mid Elise Smolder Misfortune Elise?
Yep.
That's like we're playing Misfortune. We got very minimal CC, and then it's like a poke comp, but it's also a hard engage with Set. Like that was the game that anyone's legend lost, and I feel like a lot of these game 3s and 4s, it's not even the game 5s we're in Fearless where we're seeing all these like whack comps. It's like the game 3s and 4s that are just like one team just tosses a game away with like the most egregious draft possible. I don't understand. But that's one of them for sure.
I can't even like make the excuse like that. Oh, the marksman pool was way too pinched. Like Hope had to play Misfortune. No, it wasn't. There were still like very competent marksmen like that you could put next to Elite. One of the drafts we'll talk about later that did get the Elise win, I think works well with how early game you like or oriented you want to play. But yeah, why are we picking Smolder when we already have Nidalee Elise locked in? Like come on, guys. Like this is like drafting 101.
I mean, we say that, and yet we've seen some of the drafts in T2 over here in NA, and we just cry a lot of the time. So,
that's fair.
we leave that on the side. But, of course, with that being said, we are moving on to our next series, which was another one that kind of panned out, I think, somewhat we expected. EDG versus LNG ended up with EDG taking it 3-0. This one of the heftier matches, but the games themselves fairly long-winded. EDG taking their time almost to cement their 3-0 victory.
I'm just so depressed about LNG right now, man. Yeah. The highs of this organization. I guess maybe not the highs. The like proverbial expected results of LNG rosters at this point. Like I think they're just cursed. Like like we went from the Tarzan Doinby days where we thought this team would like win a world's title with those two playing together, and it just like did not work. And now we're watching LG team where like I don't know what this roster construction looks like, and I know a lot of people were high on players like Hai Chow looked pretty good in Demacia Cup at points. Like Zika supposed to be a pretty high caliber top lane talent prospect, but losing 3-0 to this EDG roster, like with like Wink and friends is how I think about it.
Yeah, no. It was emphatic too. Like 15,000 gold lead in game 3 or game 2, sorry, in 35 minutes. And yeah, it feels like the LNG fans are sitting here. It's like you have a promising roster. You get to Worlds, you kind of bomb out. It's like, oh, Gala's in Elo hell. Like Scout did this, whatever. I've seen it all on social media, and they're just like praying that one roster is coming soon. One of these days, we're just gonna get that JDG BLG level roster. And now they're just here and they're in shambles. Like, oh no, what's going on? Yeah, I don't know. It clearly before the season 2 was a question mark. Is like, oh, this is a really like questionable roster in terms of like what people may be expected from LNG, and there might have been some high hopes there, and like, oh, this could work, that could work, but no. I think it's gone about like, especially after this series, like it was already bad enough. Like this series just is like the nail in the coffin. Like a team like EDG is not a team you should be getting 3-0'd by in this type of fashion. Like you said, Wink and friends, like this roster isn't a whole lot. They brought up the whole meme about, the best ADCs in LPL are like, Elk and Pays, and now Assume when nothing's on the line right now. So I thought that was really funny. But yeah, it's kind of like a train wreck. There's nothing else that I really have to say about that.
I mean, if you don't even watch the series, it's a fact that in this kind of battle for fourth, we're looking at Angel and Xiaohao that both got 31 KDA or whatever the percentage is, but both of them only died once in the series overall. Like that in itself just shows I think a wild gap when you can't even find a pacing on the jungle mid of the other side. So both of them were able to bang out. I think Angel was sitting at 15-1 and 16, crazy stat line for themselves. So the fact that, even Yanni was stating like this is one of the biggest falls from grace. LNG here just having struggles throughout, and unfortunately you don't get time to recuperate in there either. You're kind of locked out, and now you have to go back to the drawing board and go, well, crap, we got to figure this out for the next time. Do we expect to see a rise back for LNG, or would you rather not place your hopes considering how much expectations were already set forward for them at the beginning of the split?
So the fact that they're going to get put in like, I like looking really far ahead. I know with how LPO's formatted, like when we go into split 2, like the best teams, like the top seeds from this regular split are like going to be put in their own group, and then like subsequently, like you're going to seed based off of placement from split 1. LNG should be put in like a pretty comfortable spot. I do think LNG are one of the teams that could benefit the most from how much downtime they're going to have in between the 2 splits, and I do still think that like Zhuo is a very good support prospect a lot of people look for. I still think like Zika you could get a lot more out of. It's like it definitely feels like a mesh thing. I think that LNG, once they drop the Thunder Talk series, like things kind of started to spiral, and we'll talk about Thunder Talk obviously and how much better they've looked after that series, but if you're LNG like expected to win that series and you drop it like not knowing how good Thunder Talk was actually going to scale up and end up being, like that's a really big blow. And going back to like the split conversation, right? Like it's 3 best of 5, so like dropping the first one already puts you in so much of a deep dive. I think LNG should be able to rebound, and they'll look better in split 2. I think they'll be one of the teams that looks better in split 2. And the flip side of it for EDG is this is a really good way to go into your offseason as well, right? With a commanding 3-0 win. A lot of these players are guys that like a couple splits ago were heralded as like the next best out of the LDL, like ZDZ. We've been waiting for him to really break out. I've, like you guys mentioned, like Angel, really impressed with where he's been at. And then Wink is another one of those supports where, I think if he's in a spot like those other guys we talked about, like with like Feather and company, he would look a lot more impressive with more time. I think these 2 rosters just need to gel more, and they should look better in split 2 with a more favorable group to play out of, especially for LNG.
Yeah. I think Hai Chao, or not Hai Chao, sorry. I get the names mixed up sometimes. Xiao Hao on EDG's
Wow, fair. No, I'm joking.
side. Hai Chao, Xiao Hao. No, Xiao Hao I think he did have a great series, and I think he impressed me a lot. Again, it's kind of hard to say because they did play LNG, who did have a really rough series, but I think that's a really good point that Slayer made, because I hadn't actually looked ahead that far. I think that, yeah. I think it'll be, well, at least it will objectively be easier if they're put into that type of situation. But I don't know. Fotic for a while has been struggling in the LPL.
Yep.
So I don't know if like how many more chances are you going to give before it's kind of like, are you going to get to the level that maybe some people have seen you or like expect you to get to. He had 1 kill in this best of 5. Like that's it, 1 kill. It's pretty rough, man. I don't know. I think it's kind of sketchy, but with the level that they're at now, it's kind of like when you hit rock bottom, the only way is up. Like it'd be pretty bad to top how much of an underperformance they had in this split number 1.
It's a rough one
And
to
this
think
is
about,
like,
but yeah, you gotta kind of get back up on there, huh?
yeah, LNG also is like the one team I think they like didn't kneecap themselves in draft, which is like really just rub salt in the wound. Like these are good drafts.
Yeah, they got
As
Kalen
well.
Lux
Like
into Alistair. Like that's solid.
yeah, like that was a good like bottom lane combo. I actually didn't hate the Zika Wukong top with double marksman next to a Sejuani, so you can like with a Braum, like that's a ton of space you can create for 2 marksmen. Like you mentioned, if Photic doesn't have like 1 kill this entire series, like next to a Corki and with this on hit Varus, that probably shreds this EDG comp that's also trying to front to back. Like game 2, you know, going with Ezreal Azir with a Leona, Rumble, Viego. Like those are so many power pick champions in the LPL right now, I would say. So the drafts are good. We can take that away from this series.
Gotta
Just the
take
gameplay's got to
something.
get better.
Yeah, I was about to say you got to take something because honestly, everything else is looking a little bit rough in there. But overall, it was very fun to see, and again, that off time will be very interesting to watch. Again, expectations tempering it with reality will be the big step for them. Granted, moving into the next week, we'll go from a 3-0 to another banger of a series, whether you like it or not, because we got Ultra Prime going up against OMG with OMG, Yanni liking to call it the duality of man in a nutshell. This squad has some thoughts in there as they lost 2-3 over to the likes of Ultra Prime.
Yeah, I mean, I think OMG had a little bit of a higher stock going into this series, even though it was kind of a nothing series,
Or
because they
one,
actually
I do
took JD,
apologize. You are correct. Yeah. Whoops.
just because they took JDG to 5 games,
Yep.
right? And going back to that whole JDG point about can they stay consistent? If you're going 5 games with OMG, that's not what top teams do. Top teams are not going to go 5 games with a team like OMG. But yeah, I mean, it actually looked good for them. I mean, they started off with a nice game, but then Ultra Prime kind of bounced back. I don't know. This whole series is kind of like a blur to me. I felt like it had no business being this close. It's just like this just really weren't there to kind of like make it so that it was like super hype.
This matchup, so something I've loved to talk about on the broadcast is this is like just such a pivot. Sorry, Faris, but because nobody's doing like the cool like walkouts anymore. I don't know if you guys noticed watching like maybe just highlights to recap, but like the classic old LPL walkouts where like people used to hit like crazy emotes. Nobody's doing that anymore. So
Yeah.
I've been
hell?
grading fit checks, and this is by far the coolest fit check matchup of the entire LPL calendar year. Like, if you have time to watch the highlights, just look at the fits that both teams are wearing. It's like Ultra Prime have this like crazy looking royal purple. It's like these are tracksuits, by the way. Everyone's just wearing full colors. It's like the royal purple from Ultra Prime, and then it's this like OMG like cream orange. Actually, the coolest. Like I watched the highlights back. I was just staring at the player cam, so I was like, I can't watch the game. Like these fits are just so cool.
Dude, it's a whole tsunami in the studio, bro, because they're just drowning everyone.
It's
with all
so
that.
loud. It's so
it's
loud.
It's very loud. Those are two very loud colors. But no, I think OMG is a team that showed they've got some pretty critical pieces that once they start, when they play together well in their style, it kind of just this like in your face sort of like we don't really care about playing range comps. We're gonna just throw hands sort of deal. They can be a really scary team for people that underestimate them. Like you talked about with like how JDG approached the series. Like Starry's Kai'Sa in this game 5 goes absolutely crazy into a comp that I don't really think he has much business like throwing this much damage down. Like playing into a Scion with an Orianna through like trying to get Braum damage through. You got like Crescent Guard. Like there's so many ways to just block Kai'Sa's entire kit in this game, and Oh, actually, I just realized I just switched drafts completely. But oh, this was the Tryndamere mid game. Oh my
Yeah.
god. All right, yes,
Yeah,
this was the Saber Tryndamere mid. All right, yeah. But this guy still goes crazy. I think Lin Feng has been probably their highest performing player. I thought the Silas was, while like the stats don't really show, it was like a really good answer into like this Tryndamere mid. They have some pocket picks they can go to. They recognize, I think, the meta very well on the OMG side, and I'm curious to see. I feel like a broken record saying this with more time, but like most of these teams we talked about, like need time.
Yep.
This OMG team doesn't need time to like, because oh god, they've had disaster compared to their expectations. This OMG team is just playing free money, like low expectations, young guys that they just kind of pulled up through the system, and in spots they've been shining stars, and I think Lin Feng deserves some flowers for how OMG have performed despite their 1-2 record or not looking the best.
Yeah. And Ultra Prime's players looked well. I mean, like I was hearing a lot of hate to Wonjong in this series, but I don't even think Wonjong played too terribly. And they've definitely got some players that have like they've had their time to shine a little bit. Again, like Saber, like I don't know what the hell the Tryndamere mid was, but Saber's had some good moments in the split too. So I think they got some solid players. I think Moham was very criticized last year for being like an OTP on the rel. Like if you ban rel or rel's gone, like this guy is complete and utter ass. And you know what? He's leveled up at least a little bit. Like off of that rel, like he's kind of expanding the pool. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Delight with how much he does like to play those engaged champions. He's obviously not as good as Delight is. But yeah, I think he's someone who could definitely flourish into a really strong support player. And yeah, Starry had a really good series as well. And I mean, yeah, they got the win. They got the dub. They prevented themselves from finishing in that fourth spot and got the third seed there in Group B. So, back to that kind of talk about, the next split. And again, with time, I think it's just so hard to get away from that conversation. But I think OMG could definitely kind of rise to the top of like the top of the bottom if they keep at it.
It's not a tag that any team would like to have, but it's one that they are currently held on to until we see any change later on down the line. So I do agree with you. OMG taking a victory, taking the small wins where they can, and Ultra Prime at least going out in style. I mean, you got Slayer's seal of approval for the outfits, so I mean, try and get Slayer's seal of approval for your gameplay next, and maybe you get the whole package. So
Game 3 definitely does not get my seal of approval. Like this was a banger series, but like this series should have been a 3-1 for Ultra Prime. Like they actually threw. I kind of forgot that Junhao is like 2-0-3 on a Lee Sin with like a kind of disgusting early gold lead and feats like secured, and they kind of just wasted it. I guess that's what happens. We got to figure out who, like, the LPL's got to figure out who to put next to these Elise supports, man. Like,
I was about to say, it's another Elise loss, man.
You cannot play Ashe Elise. Like, that just does not work. That does not compute. Like, these are not the champions that we should be putting next to this Elise support. Like, yes, I recognize it's really sick at diving in the split push heavy meta of the LPL, but bro, like, once we get out of lanes, Ashe Elise is ass Elise. Like that's what this this game like showed it.
Dude, we had the Jinx Elise from Weibo in that barn burner versus JDG.
Yeah.
Dude, they'll just toss anything with it. They just love that. They love the pick.
Well, one team we'll get to, I think, figured out like one way to play the Elise, like with one marksman that I don't want to spoil. But yeah,
I think when they play with, I mean, maybe I'm spoiling it here, but I think like just off the top of my head, without knowing any of the drafts, like Kaisa is like the one that makes the most sense. Like any kind of champion that wants to dive, like go forward, but it kind of just makes sense with it. But it's just like the Ashes and the Jinx, they're playing from range. They're like kiting. They're playing back, or they're
farming lane, right? Like they're not trying to be that crazy. Especially now with the Ashe changes, where they took away a lot of her like early damage on the volley. Like Ashe's lane bully prowess is kind of gone. Not kind of gone. It's just nerfed. Like they took away the volley early game, like early levels damage. Like her range focus damage early is gone, but it scales better now. I think volley and her Q do. So she's not as much of a lane bully. Yeah, it just, if you're gonna pick Elise, like you got to have like a crazy aggro AD carry. Like I think
some teams as well were also, because Elise can roam really well, and she
And
has like
dive.
really good presence around the map to like just randomly dive top lane if she moves up there. Having an AD carry that's kind of safe-ish. Not every AD carry is super safe, but having like something like Ezreal and Ashe that are like long range that can kind of handle a 1 versus 2 scenario for a little bit too. I don't know this for sure, but I that was kind of what I was brainstorming too over the course of this last week watching these games. It's like, because the elite support players are just level 2 running around the map. They're mid lane, they're looking for dives, they're running it down for vision. Like they'll just do anything. So
Yeah.
it's all over the place.
I guess that's a great caveat to make. It's just that the teams that we've been seeing trying the elite support, like they don't transition their early leads well. Which, to be fair, most of the teams we've talked about playing the elite support outside of Weibo are teams that have struggled to translate leads through different phases of the game. So,
No,
but that, yeah, Ultra
It's kind of
Prime,
like a Pike style
yeah,
thing.
it's like I would agree. But Ultra Prime, yeah, they went from like at 13 minutes being up 3K gold with feats on a Fed Leeson to getting wrecked at Atacon at 21 minutes down 3K gold. Like that's just you can't be doing that if you're going to play the Elise comp.
Yeah, you want to talk about getting wrecked, though. There was another team that got wrecked, which is our next series that we're going to talk about here. NIP putting the seal on their first place position over there in Group D. They took it to town over RNG. Royal never give up. 3 games after a 41-minute banger. After that, it was all easy for NIP as they took the next 2 games, 29 minutes and 27:47, some of the fastest we've seen, at least throughout this week 5 as well.
Yeah. It felt like NIP had just had the stamina game on RNG. Like RNG poured all their strength into game 1. It didn't work out, and then it was just downhill from there. I mean, Slayer and we're the AD carry players. Did you see what Leave? I mean, were you casting this game at all?
No,
Okay.
I was not on RNG and NIP.
Yeah, Leave had a crazy Kaisa build.
Yeah, it
that
was
I actually haven't
absolutely
seen
absurd.
replicated elsewhere, but it's like Essence Reaver.
Static.
Yeah, Essence
Static
Reaver
rush
static
into
into
ER.
AP.
Yeah, into
Yeah.
full AP.
And it did a lot of damage. Like Leave was like pumping the damage numbers in this game. So that was like off the top of my head, from what I can remember, that was a really kind of unique thing that happened. And also the fact that it was so close, the rest of the series was a stomp. And again, RNG, they're close. They're hanging on. It's just NIP are continuously finding just those edges in the fights to get over. And then, it just wasn't the same case in game 2 and 3.
Before we go further, I
Yeah.
do want to put a little bit of a mind game or not a mind game, but a thought process here. Would you say the damage numbers with this build look crazier because of the lower HP that we saw on the other side? I mean, you got a Rumble, you got a Nocturne, some of the I would say some of the easier to pop with an AP build there. Obviously outside of the Rel going for 41 minutes. Do you think the build was amplified by the squishier members on the side, or do you just think that it was just a well-played build style from Leave himself?
I think when it comes to like damage number talks, I actually think it's easier to bump your damage numbers up as an AD carry player if you're just slapping tanks all game.
True.
So I would say that these damage numbers reflect how crazy of a performance this was. I'm glad you brought up Faris, like now soaking it in more, because even in this game, I feel like classic AD Kaisa would have made so much more sense, right? Because you're playing into a Nocturne like Nocturne Rumble comp that's like constantly just going to try and dive you. So in my head, like the best change would be to play an AD Kaisa that would dive with your Ambessa, your Aurora, right? Like diving forward to get away from the Nocturne. Like this isn't a game where I thought like a huge poke Void Seeker Kaisa would even really work. Outside the fact that like Orbital's saying there weren't very many tanks to like worry about. And it just didn't matter. Like this guy, like if this is the Leave we're getting for playoffs, look out, AL, bro. That's all I'm saying. Like this is gross.
Yeah, it was nuts. And
this entire team is just full ultimate bravery, by the way. Did like Doinby like poison the water or something? Like Leave's like, yeah, you know what, man? I saw your Pantheon build from last series. What do you know about my Essence Reaver Kaisa? What are we doing?
Yeah, I think part of it too is and this was kind of like something that was happening when Kaisa had that LS build where she was being built that poke way, kind of similar to what's going on here, just with that weird ER variation. Is if you feel like you can't get in range to actually hit an auto attack, like Corki might annihilate you. Zaya is a standard counter into Kaisa because she just will annihilate anyone that's in range. And you're going to get jumped on by a Nocturne or a Rumble. If you kind of just sit there, maybe out of fog, so you can't get hit by the paranoias, and you just chalk out Void Seekers from range, there's nothing Zaya can do. Like she just can't hit you. That's the biggest weakness of Zaya, is her low range. So I feel like that could have been the mindset there. And there's a point where you're playing against AP Kaisa, and it's like that type of poke, and you just can't do anything. You can't close the gap, and these Void Seekers are just sticking to you. You have the free Horizon focus vision when one hits, and you can't get away. They literally know where you are every single time. It's annoying as hell.
This is why Faris is bar none a higher elo and better mind 80 carry player than I am. Right there.
Well,
I mean, you're climbing pretty well, bro. You're getting up there.
both of you guys are
Let's
like
hope, man. Let's hope.
10 times higher than me, so I'm not even going to enter the conversation right there. But still, again,
We-
NIP overall looking like a very strong team overall as one of the first seeds rolling in there. And again, I think even Yanni was very, very excited for this team to come up here and say, hey, how well are they going to play? How well are they going to stack up? Really show their stuff now, and hoping to see a little bit more out of them. We're going to move on because we are running just a slight bit short on time. I realize we have a lot more to get through, so we're going to try and keep this moving. Right now, we're moving over to Thunder Talk, the team that I think everyone was very excited to talk about. This one, our last 5-game series from this week, taking it over Billy Gaming. I mean, even Yanni was like, give us more Thunder Talk if we can.
Yeah, this was the second to last series I got to cast of the regular split. I've been on all 3 Thunder Talk series. Absolute gift.
Bro's been Thunder talking.
I am the Thunder Talk representative, I guess now, and I could not be happier. This team is we labeled it the Cinderella team. It's kind of a team of destiny. There's just so much fun stories to talk about with this squad that I'll save a bit for when we preview their playoff matchup. But in this series, as much as Thunder Talk, we're definitely playing confident, playing their style. Saytab got some of his melee champions out of the way here. He breaks out like a Yone game 1 that's like absolute filthy into a double marksman comp. He plays like it was his first Yone game of the split. He plays the proverbial Jace, which I know is definitely a big LPL pick, but like it was his first Jace game mid. Slaps around BLG in game 2. He's been super impressive. We already talked about 1xN, but for as much as I want to give Thunder Talk credit, BLG came into this matchup thinking they were just going to slap Thunder Talk around and were absolutely disrespectful. Like there were so many times where I was like, yo, Knight, or everybody except Knight. Knight was the one guy. Like, yo, Elk and on, like, why are we trading like this level 2? Like, just giving free kills to 1xN. This makes no sense. Like, Ben, why are we like so far up on a wave when a Fed Camille could just hookshot and like nuke you and give a solo kill? Like games 1, 2, and even unfortunately 5, where as much as Thunder Talk looked very impressive, like BLG were just handing them freebies. And if we're talking about drafts, right? We'll talk. I'll mention the Elise point in a bit because this was the game I was going to talk about. Elise game 5 draft. Like if you go look at game 5 draft, just the draft and not the score of that series, there is no reality except this one where Thunder Talk win. There's like 0 realities. It's like a disgusting comp draft from BLG. Just gap Thunder Talk. They opt for the sort of, I believe it was. I need to make sure I refresh myself here. Oh yeah, so it was the like Kaisa. This was the B1 Camille game. So it's game 5, and Hoya's like Hoya, who's like a Poppy player. He has a really good Ornn. He plays Gragas top. He's like, nah. Is that Gigabit? Yeah, dude, lock me Camille B1. Camille B1. That immediately gets countered. Immediately gets countered out. You then pick Kaisa not, and it's switched on its head and answered by a Taric, and a Wukong, which just make Nautilus's life like living hell. This Taric should have been like absolutely crazy. And then you get Elk on a comfortable Zaya. You get Knight on his Syndra, which, by the way, going into this matchup, had a 75% win rate in 60 games played. Knight has won 3/4 of 60 games on Syndra into this Talia. Like, this draft is so giga-busted for BLG, but they just threw. And it wasn't even, it was the most blown out series game of the entire series. Was game number 5. It was wow.
Yeah, weighing on specifically for BLG, they had a stinker. These two were,
Disgusting.
yeah, they are on a whole low light reel for a while after that series. It was bad. Yeah, Knights and Elo Hell in the series, like straight up. Even Ben, yeah, game 5. It's a great point. Like Aatrox is a known good matchup versus Camille. Maybe later on, like Camille makes it a little bit harder for him. But you're talking about one of the top laners that's like not one to make these types of mistakes, not one to give you anything. Like, he is so consistent. He's been so good for so long, and
He
obviously you can't
was.
expect him to just go crazy. But like, yeah, I mean, it is blasphemous almost that Hoya did this and got away with it.
Yeah, I mean, Ben was maybe one of the best top like to the best top player in the world after Worlds
Yeah,
last year, and
oh,
and
easily.
easily. So, and also, so I'll go to the Elise point because BLG did wake up for games 3 and 4 and like drag this one out. This was my favorite Elise comp where we had on the Elise and you put Twitch next to it. I think Twitch got buffed and people are sleeping on Twitch's ability. You definitely have to get an early lead and have the right sort of comp where you're not just getting like blasted whenever you come out of invis, but Elk was, or his game 3. Elk and On were just always up in 1xn and Feather's grill and then constantly roaming together on the map once Elk got fed. And that was my favorite Elise comp that we've seen. The one of the 2 wins we've seen with Elise drafted in the LPL was with Elk's Twitch.
I love the Twitch game.
Yep.
And to play Twitch, you have to be you don't play Twitch like a traditional AD carry. You have to be a complete psychopath.
Yep.
And that's exactly what Elk was. In contrast, I know this is the LPL talk. We're not supposed to talk about LCK, but Ruler played a Twitch game and played it like a Jinx against Hanwha Life. And that was the most disgusting Twitch game I've ever seen in my entire life. It was terrible. The way you play Twitch is how Elk played it, bro. You cannot be predictable. You're up in their jungle. You're literally sitting there at towers, just praying the Jinx or whoever you're playing against.
Yeah,
The
just
Ezreal in
sitting
this
in
case
Viz
just
mid
steps
lane.
forwards.
Yeah,
Like,
just
you have to
waiting.
be a psycho. Elk played this game so well, and that was kind of the. And then they won the next game, and I was like, oh god, are we really about to get this? Like, no, they're ramping up,
Dude,
but yeah, they clutched
dude,
up.
yeah, we're sitting on draft at game 5. Like it was me and Covey. We're just like, damn it, dude. Like Thunder Talk, they were so close. Like, but this draft is gross. And then I have to watch Hoya solo kill Bin and watch Own flash whiff a flash E onto a Nihilist that sidesteps it. Otacon
Oh
just
my God.
dies. Like if you want to watch the worst fight in BLG history, watch the Otacon fight from game 5. It hurt.
For reference, the reason that we are kind of popping off about this game, that was the sole game that Thunder Talk only died twice as a team. That game, everyone on Thunder Talk was pretty much unkillable outside of Feather. And for Feather, it's a support. We give them credit where credit is due. BLG did not get a single kill on any of the carries out there. So it makes sense, again, when the draft came through. Difficult times, of course, for BLG, but they're still sitting at second, which means they still make it in there. And so we'll see if they can kind of tune things up again. And for the ramp up, maybe not bang it out in 26 minutes, which is terrifying to think about. Oh, that's a downhill train. But moving on.
One more quick fun fact, by the way. That is the first time Knight has lost a best of 5 in the LPL since 2022.
That's a crazy stat.
Oh.
That was an insane stat to drop. Like, that was nuts. Just
Is
shows
that
how
including?
dominant he's been.
That's including. Oh wait, you said only LPL? Is
Only
that
LP, yeah, only
Got it.
LPL
Okay.
best of 5s, which does nerf it a bit, but like 3 years of
Still
your
amazing.
main region of not especially the LPL, like we talked about the best of 5 gauntlet, like
Exactly.
man.
Exactly.
Crazy work. Still though, I'm excited to see what they can do in playoffs. Either way, these top 2 from every group feel like they have this massive weight on them, and it's exciting to see it be thrown around. So very, very excited to see what more can be done. Right now we're moving on to our second to last series that was played in week number 5. It was IG versus FPX, and IG came out with a stomping victory, 3-0 in that one as well.
Yeah, so the stakes of this series were intriguing because I think for the group finish, if like this, it looked on paper like IG need to win the series, but actually with the fact that FPX was already 0-2 and RNG was the other 1-1 team, like, or I guess they were 1-2 by this point. All IG needed to do with the head-to-head was win one game, and they actually locked the second spot. So that's why game 1 of the series was like a lot, kind of like what we talked about with the earlier NIP series. Like game 1 was where everybody like exacerbated all their energy. It felt like in this series. This one actually was when it happened, because FPX, the only way they somehow snuck into playoffs was if they, or snuck RNG in, is if they were able to 3-0. So once IG won game 1, like the group was locked up. FPX, like, the win was taken out of their sails. But man, was that game 1 fun. That was a very fun game 1.
And then after that, we saw the shattering of, the dreams, the hopes, and all. Reality set in, and we had a 21-minute game afterwards.
Yep.
Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, Gala Ziggs is nuts. Like, this guy's one of the best Ziggs in the world. And it's kind of weird because Gala, you wouldn't really think that Gala, of all players, would be kind of that Ziggs guy, but he's that Ziggs guy. Also, shout out to Thashai Zambessa in game 1. Like, this guy was going crazy on that champion and kind of like making me look back to, I mean, nothing makes me look back to season 8 Thashai. It feels like that Thashai is long gone, but yeah, he was popping off, and I think he had a really good series this time around. Also, Gala took comment on Ezreal in game 3, which was
illegal.
I have this jotted down in my notes. Gala comment Ezreal game 3, 10 exclamation marks.
Illegal.
Yeah,
Illegal.
that's weird.
And they still
That
rocked
felt
it.
illegal, but if a guy like Gala is going to do it, especially, if I'm not mistaken, Faris is one of the biggest Gala glazers I've ever met.
Dude, he's low-key the truth, except when he takes comment on Ezreal.
He's the truth until he gets to an international stage. It's unfortunate.
No, I can't defend him there.
Yeah, it's dude. I also love Gala, so we're on the same front there. Speaking of psychopaths, though, Bot may be the most psychopathic AD carry player I've seen in the LPL, and it was kind of a treat to watch because it was like low-key working game 1 on his Callista. But yeah, man, this IG team, like they could be the dark horse team. I know it's looked like so shaky in Group D, and like NIP is a very fun story, but like, dude, we're still talking about like Rookie and like Gala, and I know like the Shy doesn't even need to be season 8 the Shy on this team for them to make a run. Like Mako moving over here to IG after all of that time, like this team should be, if they lock in, like they will be such a much harder out in the bottom of the bracket than people are thinking, and I just hope they lock in.
Mm-hmm. I think Yanni was even on that same train saying, hey, listen, IG passed the clean series test. Obviously, game 1, as you mentioned, a little bit more on the line. But after that, really, closed a lot of those issues up. Went out on a clean series 3-0, and we expect some stuff from them in the future, which, again, I'll lean into as well. I'm very excited to see what they can throw down. Of course, at the end of the entirety of week 5, we had one of the more reverse situations to occur. We talked about just then, it was a banger of a game 1. Well, in the series between Top Esports and LGD, it was a little bit different. Game 3 was actually a banger, even though this was a 3-0 for Top Esports.
Yeah,
we got to talk about the thing, Slayer,
dude. Like as much as it like the clean series test is like a very cool thing, a very valid thing from Yanni, but that does not count for this one. Like Top Esports should have lost game 1. It is one blast cone. Like it's all over LPL, like the official LPL socials. If you haven't seen it, like you just want to look up the clip on like any like Twitter, X, TikTok, whatever. Like they are so far ahead. LGD are in the driver's seat, and Climber hits one blast cone and throws a 3-item Olaf into his backline. Like he literally he lands in between both the AD carry and support, and like just wrecks them, and it completely took the wind out of their sails. Like that, this should have been a 3-1 for Top Esports, even if they looked in form. But that is the worst Blasco mistake I've seen in my casting career. It is,
yeah, it's comical. It's like a maybe not 1 in a million, but 1 in a very large number play. I mean, the next game was pretty dominant. 26 minutes, 10k lead for Tess. I mean, it was like a whole melee draft for LGD, like Jax, Sedge, Yone, Zaya versus like an Ezreal. Bro, like Jackie Love is hard chilling that whole game. Nothing is ever going to touch him. And then if we think about game 3, like again, I love to talk about the AD carries. I'm being like so dead ass when I say this. Even though LGD lost too, which is kind
Oh
of the
yeah.
craziest thing, this is the most insane Draven I've ever seen in my life from
Yep.
Shalia. That was so nuts. He did 10,000 damage on Draven in one fight. On Draven, those are like Ezreal numbers when Ezreal's turbo fed. On Draven, 10,000. It was crazy.
This game would have ended 10 minutes earlier if Xia didn't
Yeah.
have the most incredible. There are like there are 2 fights where he like perfectly perfectly flashes, like spaces so well. I think the first one was the Baron fight that happened. These 2 teams also like did the classic, like this is an NA classic right here, where they just they both try to start Baron twice in a row, and a fight breaks out, and everybody limps away like 1 HP. Oh yeah, yeah, it's absolutely. And then Xiaoya, the defense he has in like, yeah, he's like perfectly flashing away from Nidalee hops, like 10 HP, surviving and ruining a Baron take for top, and where they think he's just dead, sidestepping piercing arrows blind. He's in his own base, like pleading with somebody on his team to help him as he like keeps 369's Aatrox like off to the side by himself and wins. By the way, like this is season 25. AD carries don't do that anymore. It was a treat to watch, and it's funny because these are the only 2 consistent, if I'm not mistaken, Draven players I can remember. I know if I'm not wrong, I think Jackie Love does have the Draven in the bag sometimes, and then Xiaoya is obviously a big Draven guy. So I hate playing against Dravens. I hate this champion, but like when it's real fun to watch when it's on like this.
Yeah, Jacula was the Draven OTP coming into his pro career.
Yes, yeah, right.
And yeah, he pulls it up from time to time. But yeah, that was incredible. Also, despite 369, like you said, losing that 1v1, he got outplayed, but 369 Aatrox was massive for top esports in this series. Like, you can't really see it reflected in the scoreline, but he was doing big things, like tanking up so much damage, the healing, like just typical Aatrox stuff, going absolutely crazy.
This was the most consistent high-level 369 play I've seen in a best of 5 in a while. It feels like this, like if you get this 369 for top esports, with
it's so fitting to say that because of his name too. Like, what are you gonna get? You're gonna get the 3, the 6, or the 9.
Yeah, he definitely had like. I think we've joked that he, like, if you know the Anthony Fantano like album reviews, we were like game 1 was like a low 9, or like a high 8 to a low 9, and then this Aatrox performance was like a 9. Yeah, so well, I mean, we'll talk more about top esports, but outside they look pretty good outside of disrespecting Xiaoya's Draven and game 1, where Climber was like, "Hey, you guys can have the win. Actually, we got you."
All right. Well, that's a good way to look at it, because we are heading into how are we going to take a look at these teams as now they face off across the groups. And with that, it does bring to a close stage 1. So going into stage number 2, we are going to have a lot of these seed 2s moving in to face off against each other, and seed 1s facing off against each other. For those tuning in right now, there will be a very nice little partially cut out image of the standings, so you get a good idea of what we're going to be talking about here next. But the idea reaching in is top esports will be going up against IG. So considering we just talked about top, let's go ahead and talk about the series as a whole, as these 2 will be clashing to see how they do in round number 1. Gentlemen, I want to get your thoughts, your ideas, and your predictions for how this matchup is going to go.
IG,
oh man,
yeah, this is going to be a common theme when we talk about these series. Like, every single series is good, and it's going to be super exciting. But one of these teams are going home because this is the lower bracket. And Tess, they lost to Anyone's Legend. They had the shakiness against, LGD, and IG lost to NIP, but NIP looked like one of the best teams, and that was earlier on. I think IG is starting to slowly hit their stride, and they are a little bit all over the place sometimes and have that really big int factor. But, simply, I think they just look better than Test right now. I think this is actually, of all of the series, probably one of the easier ones to predict. I feel like IG is probably going to take it in a 3-1 or a 3-2.
Yeah,
We got to pick
I'm
one.
with
Is it gonna be 3-1 or 3-2? Because we got to get the actual numbers
3-1.
on it. Come on, 3-1.
3-1. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I think it'll go 5. I hope it goes 5. I do lean towards IG as well. I'm just like looking across like, lane to lane, right? Like how I feel these guys are in form before I think about like overall like team form. I think right now I like 369 up against the Shy. Like obviously such a historically fun top lane matchup. I think 369 has been more impressive, especially coming off that LGD series. So I would lean like a little bit towards 369. Jungle, I think, is like the biggest what if of this series because when both these teams have struggled most, it's been poor jungle play. Like Kanavi's had some stinkers. I think the AL series was like a really good proponent of some of the stinkers he had up against Tarzan. Like JJ has also, when they just got slapped around by NIP, I was disappointed with his play a lot. But where I think the real edge goes to IG for me is the fact that you've got Gala and Rookie probably playing their best league with pretty wide and creative champ pools. And I know there's a bunch of top esports fans. I know Jackie Love is like almost an icon in the LPL.
Yeah.
But I just think Gala gaps Jackie Love in this series. And I will sit here and say it. You can clip it and post it wherever you want. But I think Gala gaps Jackie Love, and I think Rookie is far better than Cream right now. And I think where we're at with League, it's just too much to overcome. So I'll go 3-2 because I think we'll have some like staple 369 performances. Kanavi, like he's got some really good stats when he gets his Vi games. Like I think whenever we get the Kanavi Vi game, like Top will win that game too. But look for like Gala and Rookie to be like MVP of this series and take it home because we're not an international yet, so we don't get a nerf Gala yet. So
I might be crazy to say this, but I feel like Cream hasn't hit the level he was at. Kind of when OMG, I think back in 2023, was going crazy with that roster when Cream was there. I feel like Cream has yet to get back to that point where he was transitioning from OMG to top esports. He was like, his stock just skyrocketed, and that's why Test picked him up. And I feel like this year, and like especially at Worlds last year, he was having a really hard time getting back to that kind of form too. So yeah, I feel like he has potential, but as well, I think you're absolutely correct in the whole rookie Cream assessment as well.
Well, everyone here on the desk is going to be saying that IG are going to take it, but surprisingly, well, or maybe not surprisingly, considering how competitive the LPL is, across these series, Yanni even agrees that these are all going to be very, very contested, but IG will take it 3-1, as he told in his predictions as well. So, leaning into the IG favor, maybe we do get to see Tess be able to surprise us at the end of the day, but that'll be a tall task to go ahead and overcome. Looking into the next second seed matchup will be BLG versus WBG Weibo Gaming. In this one, I mean, it's a tough call, guys. It is a very, very tough call considering what we've seen and what we've maybe come to not expect in some of these matchups.
It's so tragic that this is the lower bracket matchup. Like seriously, this is insane.
It's BLG's fault.
Yeah, no, actually it is. Because if this was
it's
Weibo,
actually both teams' fault, by the way. Yeah, when we talk about the Weibo JG series.
If this was Weibo and Thunder Talk, everyone would be like, oh shit, is Thunder Talk going to actually like, start this miracle run? Are they going to get going? This is the hurdle they have to get over. And that would be like a good place for Thunder Talk based on like kind of the hype and the whole Dark Horse energy. But it's just like no one thought they were going to beat BLG. So here we are in the weird alternate reality that no one really thought we would be at. And one of the two teams is going home. And it's like, I feel like BLG is going to clutch up. Like, again, they got players like Ben who like are always on form. Like Knight, who's always consistently so good, loses his first best of 5 in 3 years just like last week. It's a tall task for Weibo, and they only have one shot. I cannot bet against BLG, and I'm gonna say BLG 3-2. I'll give Weibo the benefit of the doubt, and I'll still have to go with BLG though 3-2.
Though the historical context of this matchup is so fun. I
Pulling out
have
the
a
ancient
couple.
manuscripts from the past. We got to
Yeah,
do it.
I have dude, like I pulled up like the last 6 series scores between these two teams, including international events, right? So BLG have won 5 of them. The only win for Weibo was 2023 World Semis, where they took Game 5 off of them.
Yeah.
Ever since then, like spring, summer regular seasons, BLG 2-0, 2-1. Playoffs from last summer, like 2024, BLG swept out Weibo. Summer finals, if you can remember, that was a BLG sweep as well. And then World Semis, they were able to even got their revenge last year. That was a sweep, like when everyone thought it'd be like that was probably one of the most shocking series of that Worlds. I would say the fact that we just got a BLG wiped down 3-0. So historically, BLG has Weibo's number. BLG, if they're not absolutely livid that they're in the lower bracket, like something's wrong with Team Chem. Like they should be like, like Kobe at the podium when they were like, "You're up 2-0. Why aren't you smiling?" He's like, "Job's not fit." Like they should be that angry. Like that's
Yeah.
how angry they should be going into this matchup. I think it's a BLG 3-1. I think this is like BLG sprint out to a 2-0 win. Weibo, we get like a Xiaohu masterclass maybe in one of these games to like save it for a little bit, but it's a gentleman's sweep. I would bet my top dollar that BLG are not going out and not letting this get close after what they allowed Thunder Talk to do. Especially now knowing that, I guess alluding to some of my playoff predictions later, there's a pretty likely chance in my mind that we get the rematch of that series in these playoffs.
Ooh, really banking on that rematch. And honestly, I'd love to see it too. Yanni as well, leaning into that BLG favor, whether by history or by just what we've seen so far, sitting there saying BLG 3-2 over Weibo just as well. So everyone's still in agreement that, even though these are close, it's still written down on the script, which we will hand over to producers later to go ahead and get our predictions correct. Looking over in the first seed areas, though, we're looking at Thunder Talk as well as JDG, and this one is that other side of it.
Yep.
Yeah. And oh man, what I would want to do here is just say, okay, this is where the run ends for TT, even though this is double elimination though, so they kind of get that second chance, which is
Yep.
insane for them. Uh I'm really after the BLG win, I'm really ready to just say it's Thunder Talk here. And JDG, they've shown cracks in their armor just as much as we didn't think BLG was going to have those cracks, and they were going to show that I guess that weakness there against TT. JDG's already shown that they can fall. These two teams played against each other in Demacia Cup. Again, that was back in like season 14 patch, whatever, different kind of game. Still similar though, and Thunder Talk was victorious. Everyone thought this team, you take out UCal, you bring in Sitab, and all of a sudden, like adding Sitab is like the last Infinity Stone or what? Like, how is
Yep.
this team good? It doesn't make sense, bro. What is going on? But because of this, it doesn't make sense, bro. I'm just gonna go with TT. I'm gonna say 3-2 to Thunder Talk. I'm just gonna stand on business. Like they're gonna keep going. I feel like this is it.
So, as the Thunder Talk guy, here's what I kind of said when we were talking about their BLG series win. Thunder Talk, the reason to me why they are they're such in form is because they've figured out their their composition style of play, which is unique compared to we obviously. I want to caveat that by saying they do obviously fit in pretty meta picks. Like you can't just play your own style like unique champions, especially in Fearless every time. But this style of Sitab on these melee champions that are so powerful, Hoya's ability on a weak side tank to always be useful, no matter how far he gets put behind, no matter how many times you lane swap the bottom lane into him, and allow it, because on the flip side allows 1xN to farm up and be very powerful. But for me, the X factor of Thunder Talk is when you get Beichuan and Feather on engage-oriented combos where they could just flourish in team fights. Like, look out for a Beichuan Wukong game. Like, this guy's Wukong, absolutely disgusting. Feather, Rakan, absolutely disgusting. Like, picks like that, obviously alongside. And Feather also loves to go into his bag for the hook champions, right? Like, he played a Blitzcrank in Game 4 against LNG that I think he hit like 80% of his hooks. Like, hit the first 6 of them, blew the game out of the water. His Nautilus was really good in Game 5 against BLG. as fun as like Saytab and 1xN are on like the damage numbers, and Saytab, I'll get to him in a second. Like they don't have the success they have without Hoya's sacrifices in the top lane with his champion pool and the way Beichuan and Feather set up the rest of them to just kind of knock down. It's the most fun thing. And the cherry on top is how much confidence they play with it. Like they play like the classic saying of playing with the nameplates off, right? Like they do that. They do not care who they're playing into. Like Knight, you haven't lost a BO5 in LPL. I don't give a shit. Scout, you're like one of the most decorated Eastern mid lane players all time. I don't give a damn. Like this is the new Thunder talk. And then Saytab is like the holy grail because this guy was like jumping in between like DRX, LCK Challengers roster and like the main roster, and now he's came over here. He's playing Yasuo in game 4s and solo killing people. He's playing a disgusting Yone. As Akali is undefeated in LPL and Demacia Cup right now, and he can still lean on the Jace and the meta picks and perform. The way Scout's playing right now, like I feel like I'm going insane, but Saytab might just play better than Scout in this one. Like, and that's like a huge problem. Like the way Thunder Talk is playing, JUG cannot bail out by praying to God that Paige just nukes every fight. It's not going to happen. Thunder Talk are way too poised fighting in team fights right now, and that's why I also think Thunder Talk will take it in 5 games. I can't believe I'm saying it, but the way they know their identity and they play it so well, you have to slam them in the early game to really get them off their tempo, and JG is just not a team that's going to do that right now.
Okay. Listen. I like the soapbox, and understandably, that soapbox is very much true as well. I mean, Thunder Talk have had this run where it makes you want to believe. And at this point, everyone here on the desk is believing in them. Right now, 3-2-3-2-3-1, every single person here saying Thunder Talk will take it. JDG, though, still plenty of time to go ahead and try and say, hey, we're going to kind of prove everyone wrong, especially if it comes down to a Game 5 point final series, gentlemen. We have NIP versus AL, and unfortunately, this is one where, as much as we've enjoyed NIP and their amazing job so far in Group D, they're going up against Legends here, and there is a wall in front of them.
Yeah, this is gonna be a good one. And honestly, NIP, you know, when you say that both these teams are 3-0. Which of these teams had maybe like the bigger tests? They both kind of had, I want to say maybe easier groups than the others. I don't know. A couple people were saying Group D was the group of life and every other one was kind of like set in stone. I'm shocked with how well NIP has played. I said this at the start of our discussion. Doinby looks like he never retired in the first place. It looks like this guy just went through a time portal. You know, he's holding the world's trophy. He steps through the portal, or like, you know, it's after 2020 with that kind of tragic FPX roster. And now he's here with NIP, and it's just like, he gets the whole breakdown on the meta and he's running with it. And this Anyone's Legend roster has been leveling up so much as well. Like, you know, Shanks has been having a crazy year, was leveling up last year as well. Tarzan's been a nice addition to this team. Flandre's been looking really good. This is going to be a good series. And I feel like, you know, just because of how much NIP has kind of surprised me and just how explosive they've been playing and how relatively solid they've looked in these explosive games, kind of knocking out these teams, even though it is just RNG and FPX, I'm gonna roll with them. And I'm going to say it's going to be a 3-2. I think it's going to be close. I don't think either of these teams are going to deliver a stinker in the knockouts. I think they're just too good. And again, I think is a good point that you made, Slayer, about how AL looked weak against WE, but again, it was kind of a nothing game. They might have been having fun with it. I think this is going to be a really insane series, and I think NIP will just slightly come out ahead. And it feels like I'm flipping a coin at this point, but I'm just going to go NIP 3-2.
This is a legacy game to answer, not actually, but like answer the question of who was the problem on LNG between Doinby and Tarzan, right? That's the funny part. And to kind of like compound that, it's interesting because I think why Tarzan, I know talking to some people, like why Tarzan and Doinby didn't work is I think they like had such adverse like styles of play where Doinby's the guy that will like sacrifice a lot of his early game to like farm up and really try to like put his jungler ahead. And that's why in a lot of ways I think Aki has looked so good because I think Doinby really boosts up his jungler that wants to play proactively and play for kills. Like Doinby will sacrifice a lot to get his junglers ahead, but Tarzan's like the dude who figures out how to get half a second faster clear on whatever jungler he's playing and just power farm endlessly until he's like an absolute monster. And that's why I like Shanks next to him, because I think Shanks can play pretty well on his own and doesn't need to like sacrifice a lot. It's cool to see that both these guys have found like mid to jungle pairings that I think complement them better than, unfortunately, they just didn't complement each other as well on LNG. But that being said, what this comes down to me is I think the early games are going to be really important for AL, because you have a much more informed Tarzan. You have Flandre, who I think is in a lot better of a spot ever since he came over than Shanji. And I think with, Kale playing next to Flandre and Tarzan, if they can get some really early game oriented comps and run away, they can come out on top of the series, because you got to be afraid of how Doinby, how Leave look with their comp, the comps or the champion pools they can put together and the build paths. However, I'm going to go AL 3-2, because I think that the control they've shown up against teams like Top Esports, going from early through mid and getting some of those really early wins before you can worry about the 400 CS per minute rise joke, is going to be enough here. But I think it is very coin flippy. I'm a little bit higher on anyone's legend, as much as I love the hype of an IP.
All right. Well, there you go. The first ever, at least here on the broadcast, that's the first time we are seeing a shift in who is going to take the series. Faris, the only one saying NIP. Granted, the coin was flipped, and that's the one that Faris took. So, hey, we got to go with it. Either way, we are for sure going to get a pretty damn good series, which I'm excited for as well. That will be the end of this run, though, because of course right now we are sitting here just waiting for the results of those first matches of the playoffs of the LPL. And my gosh, am I excited. We get a straight up run. By the way, for those that do not know, it is a straight run pretty much all the way to the lower bracket finals of the LPL playoffs, and then there's 1 day break, and then straight into the finals as well. For those that are wanting to tune in, it starts on Saturday. Make sure to keep track on all the socials and everything. I know LPL English will for sure be giving some love, and also Slayer will be shouting out whenever he's on live as well. But thank you to all who tuned into this one. Tell us what you think of our predictions, of our breakdowns, of our terrible, terrible ideas and thoughts on the draft, on the builds, and just about everything else out there. And also, someone go yell at Yanni, please. Get him back here. We need to wake him up at some point. Either way, thank you so much for tuning in to the aftermath of the LPL recap episode 3. Go ahead, like, follow, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff, because I know I can say that now. And we will see you all next time, maybe to go ahead and cover up the round 1 and round 2 matches. Either that, or we'll see you later. Thank you.